Hello, everybody. I am very honored today to meet with Jean-Marc Reynolds, who is the president of St. Constantine's College and St. Constantine's School. And today we will focus on St. Constantine's School. In the near future, we will meet to talk about St. Constantine's College. Hello, Jean.
It's a pleasure to be with you today. I'm excited about our chance to talk about mission and focus.
Thank you so much. I would like if you can introduce yourself to our audience.
I am professionally a philosopher. I think about Plato. I went to the University of Rochester, where I learned to think about Plato's cosmology, a task that I'm never called to speak on outside of academics. But I also began to be exposed to a Hellenistic way of teaching. A kind of Phil-Hellenistic way, and then discovered that it was a broadly Mediterranean way of teaching Socratically. And then I discovered St. Basil. I wasn't yet Orthodox. And via some of this, learning how to teach in a more traditionally, and I think more deeply Christian way, began to work in higher education, started the honors college at a major Christian university on the West Coast. It grew to be the largest school of its kind, moved on to be the chief academic officer of a Baptist university, of all things, the only Orthodox, I think, provost that they have ever had. So professionally, my job has been, oddly, despite all this work in Plato, to start new educational enterprises. But the one that I've started that's nearest and dearest to my heart, because a fullest reflection of what God has done in me. I'm a dad and just had my first grandchild. So if you're not careful, I'll show you a picture of baby Amelia.
You can, please.
So it's very wonderful to be a grandparent. But
Yeah.
So St. Constantine is kind of an outworking of both my family life and then my move into Orthodoxy about 30 years ago, and then my professional life, starting schools, usually for gifted and talented college students, but in this case, both for gifted and talented college students, but also K through 12 students, because I think we're in a crisis in K through 12 education where we're not, at least in the United States, preparing our children to go to the next level and to serve all mankind. We were talking earlier privately about the moment in the liturgy where we realize the gifts of God are for all. But we cannot serve all if we aren't prepared to serve all. And in a highly technological, highly scientific age, in an age with all the wealth of literature and poetry, our education has to be first rate. We have to give that feast of knowledge to everyone in a way they can understand. So St. Constantine, as I said earlier, reaches very deeply back into the history of the Mediterranean, to someone like Socrates, and then to someone like St. Basil, who perfected this method of education. And so in some ways, we're deeply rooted, but then we also look forward. One reason we're in Houston is the space city, right? If you are going to the moon or you're doing something like that, if you have a problem, Houston, we have a problem. So we're located here in the heart of the United States in Space City because we're also looking towards the future. How do we prepare the doctors, the lawyers, the engineers? We have more engineers in Houston than any city in the world, maybe. That's what they tell me, at least in the United States. And so we're eager to be part of that and do it in the context of the Orthodox mind, the Orthodox heart.
Yeah,
so that's a long rant, but that's how I got here.
Yeah, this is wonderful. This is a wonderful introduction. I am in fact, your description about yourself fits with the profile of the school too. We will discuss that later on. Now, I would like to ask you, when did the St. Constantine School start, and what was the initial idea?
Yes, we're 8 years old. But about 10 years ago, I moved from Los Angeles to Houston with the idea higher education in the United States is really facing a crisis that's growing and growing and growing. We face a demographic challenge in that there are fewer college students available. We have lots of colleges built on a growth model, but there are fewer just demographically in the United States students. And this crisis, which is a 2025, that's when it really starts to bite, has already shown up. So liberal arts education in general has been under a lot of financial stress. And so solving that has led to student debt. So I don't know if you're aware that many American students take on tens of thousands of dollars of debt. And so those two problems, like preserving liberal arts education, but doing so without driving students into debt, caused me to come here 10 years ago. I began to work with another university, but then realized when I got the opportunity, thanks to enormously generous Orthodox donors, to do this from scratch, that we needed to create an educational system for all God's children that could eliminate debt, that could be affordable, but also prepare students for the world we live in. So this has been about a 10-year project in terms of thinking about it, getting it ready. But St. Constantine itself, we're preparing our 8th budget. We're going, we've done 7 years. And over the last 7 years, we've gone from 0 students sitting in my living room with a yellow legal pad and 0 employees to about 450 students, kindergarten through college, here on an 11-acre campus. And so we're getting there. Our goal would be on this site to have about 600 students. I can't quite announce it here yet, but within a couple of weeks, we'll be able to announce another campus opening in another state, in another city, in the St. Constantine network.
Wonderful. That is great. That is
yes.
Great.
God is good.
Yeah, that is great. Now, I would like you to describe us more about the structure of your school.
Yeah, if you think about, as I'm almost going to work backwards, and my focus will be on K through 12, but you have to pause and think, we were a group of university educators, and we were seeing that undergraduate education was no longer affordable. We were having to charge so much. And a lot of the reason for that was heavy administrative load. And then we looked at private kindergarten through 12th grade, and often the same thing was true. The highest paid people were administrators. There were more and more administrators. Teachers were paid less and less, had very little power over anything that happened in their life. And so we began to notice something else. Kindergarten through 12th grade, we all recognize is super important. Like educating children at those levels really matters. But prestige-wise, all the prestige, oddly, is at the college end. And the entire system is kind of accidental. Like, why isn't there a seamless process from kindergarten through grade 16, if you want to call it that, through the college baccalaureate? They're sort of artificially divided. And in a world, it used to be almost no one went to college, right? So it made some sense. Actually, in the world of my grandparents, almost no one went to high school. And so in a world where everyone's going to want to go to high school, and many people, at least half of people, are going to want to go to college, it makes sense to begin to integrate the whole process, see where there are efficiencies, where, do you have a teacher who can teach both high school science and college science? Do you have a teacher who can teach, advanced calculus to high school students? All our high school students take and pass calculus because that's required for our students, but also then work with our college students. So can we get some efficiencies, some economies of scale, and use new technology, not to take teachers out of the classroom? That's a problem with online education, but to take administrators out of the system. So that how can we use technology to put administration, to outsource administration? We're talking right now on Zoom. It's a wonderful technology for meetings like this. But as we saw in COVID, it's not a wonderful technology for 5-year-olds, to sit and stare at a screen. So what if we took us, the grown-ups, the administrators, and we could have Zoom meetings all over the world and all over the country to get our expertise and pool our knowledge, but make sure that kids are outside playing. We just this week got our first 2 goats on our very urban campus. So we have a few sheep and a few goats. And if you want to teach children about nature, let these urban children who may never have seen a farm animal before grow up and play with sheep, goats. We have chickens. They get the eggs from the chickens. And this experience, then you have urban wildlife that sadly tries to get the chickens. Some hawks live up near the campus. And this is an education in and of itself. So if you can think of us as a group of college people who said, the system is broken, oh no, this system is broken, and begin to think our way backwards, that's the way to understand what we did.
By the way, I saw your photo with the goats.
It's very wonderful. I'm not
I like at the beginning I didn't understand exactly what where the photo was taken.
Yeah, no, at the school, because the other thing that we discovered is this is true of every level of student. God made us to be outside a lot and experience nature and experience trees. And we're intentionally urban because most people in the world live in cities. And that trend is just continuing. People live in cities. And in fact, if you read the Bible, we left a garden and we're headed to the city of God. But cities can have trees. And so we have trees all over our urban campus. We took the area that we live in was all parking lots. And now it is full of gardens and butterfly sanctuaries. And this is all very simple. It's not elaborate. We're in old office buildings that we have repurposed and made nice. So can you go to the heart of the city, bluntly, in a neighborhood that's not that great in terms of reputation? I live next to the campus, and transform it, make it a beautiful place, not a fancy place. We're not a fancy school, but a beautiful place. And a lot of that will have to do with nature. You know, you don't have to be rich to have a tree. And so if you plant a tree and cultivate it, we have a lot of olive trees we're cultivating on campus because of the climate here. And if you cultivate an olive tree, that's a kind of poor man's cathedral, right? If you're sitting under an olive tree on a summer day. And if you live in Houston, where the weather is, how shall we say it, hot.
I know it. I know. I don't know Houston exactly. I lived in Los Angeles.
Yeah, so you get this. You
Yeah.
sit under the tree, and it's a kind of air conditioning, automatic air conditioning under the tree. And so this kind of beautiful experience of nature is good for our souls. And getting away from it, it's funny because we're talking staring at screens. Getting away from it and spending our whole day looking at screens is not good for us. It doesn't mean we shouldn't use technology. It does mean we shouldn't let technology use us.
Exactly.
And so that's been a good thing.
Certainly, it can teach students wholeness, how to look at the world as a whole. And this is, by the way, part of our Christian teaching, part of our Orthodox teaching.
Yes. Well,
to look at the whole world as the creation of God.
I'm often asked, how do you teach a child about what it is to be a boy or a girl, a man or a woman? If you're raising chickens, no one has to explain this very much. Someone donated to us 6 chicks, and the 6 chicks turned out to be roosters. And I will just tell you from knowledge that you cannot own 6 roosters, because as the roosters grow up, they dispose of each other. I'll put it quite nicely. Their behavior is different than that of the hens, the egg hens. And so you don't have to give a large lecture to anyone. But we did not have 6 roosters for very long. We now have no roosters because the roosters behave differently than the chicks. And it turns out you shouldn't really have roosters around small children. So they
that is correct, because they are aggressive.
Yeah, they are very aggressive. Their behavior is different. And we didn't go into the coop and teach lessons on, it wasn't socialization that produced this difference because we didn't know that they were roosters. They were donated to us. And so early on, the gardener just placed them in the coop and no one looked and was checking. But then in short order, we discovered Houston, we have a problem.
Yeah.
And so the problem had to be dealt with. The point is, you don't have to get dramatic. You don't have to do a big lecture. But I think some of the problems in society have been caused by this kind of separation of ourselves from the natural world. But
That is
then
correct.
also, you want students to be able to handle mathematics, which is kind of the language of science. So we have a real focus on, in early years, a kind of hands-on experimental nature science, like being out there and doing things, and a heavy emphasis on math, learning math well, because
Wonderful.
my friends who are physicists would point out science ultimately is just math, and you're not doing real science until you can do real math.
Well,
And so that focus has helped us too.
by the way, this is true also for medicine. Like in medicine, statistics is the ultimate, you know what I mean? Like
Yes,
answer to our what we think is right or wrong.
yes, yes.
You know what I mean?
I think that's right. I sometimes think mathematics here at the school, you could think of as the vocabulary, the grammar of God, and music is the language of God. And so, in a full Orthodox education, you want to teach the grammar very carefully, the mathematics, and then how is the human fully express this in the church has, saints who were melodious, right? Who created
Exactly.
melody. And so, in some ways, we move from the grammar. I love medicine as an example of this. Uh, you have to know what a human is made of. Uh, I, getting older, have a sore shoulder. But I bet you could break down the parts of my shoulder with an adequate vocabulary. But if you're a good doctor, and I'm sure you are, you don't just treat my shoulder as like a slab of meat. It's also part of a human being. Uh,
Exactly.
and so medicine is a kind of holistic discipline, I think, as well, which is why I think Christians have always been so dominant. In one way, in the East, I've heard the argument that St. Basil may have invented the hospital in its modern form.
That is correct.
Yeah, we care, right? So
Yeah.
we are friendly to science, but we also care about the whole human person. So I think I know in the United States, nursing has always had a very heavy component of Christian people inside of it because of this caregiving aspect, but also this technical knowledge. We don't fear technical knowledge, but we
Not
know
at
how
all.
to use it.
Yeah, not at all. There is no fear of technical knowledge.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
there is no fear of science
yes.
with our Christian understanding or with our Orthodox understanding of life.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I sometimes think of it this way. My physics teacher is teaching students, and we do a lot with astronomy here because we're in
yeah,
Houston and NASA is located here. And so, of course, we do. I have former students who are NASA engineers. And so we do a lot with astronomy, but we always remind students science tells us what a star is made of, it doesn't tell us what a star is. And so Dante had this right. It's love that moves the heavens and the furthest stars. And that's not contradictory to theories of gravitation
no.
and other things. And so if you can keep both those things in mind, and you would think it wouldn't be hard, right? It wouldn't be hard to do that. Uh, we really have a whole education. I like to put it this way: the Orthodox have this right in part because our eagle has two heads on one body looking in two different directions, but on one creature.
Yeah.
So, in the same way, you can see it so often. We keep this kind of wondrous tension between, two ways of looking at the world, but in one whole. And so I feel sorry for people who end up with eagles that have only one head.
That is a good metaphor.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how true it is, but I like the icon. I like the image.
Yeah, this is
It sometimes, even with church and state, helps my students understand we're citizens here in the American Republic, but we're also churchmen and women.
that
And
that is
so
correct. Yeah.
we're one person, but we have these different responsibilities and roles. And if we make them exactly the same, then we'll be confused always. Should the church run the state? Should the state run the church? No.
No.
But we also don't have to become two people. We don't have to become I use this informally, split
Yeah.
personalities.
In fact, this is the main idea of incarnation, by the way, in our dogma.
Oh, beautiful. Yes.
Yeah.
So of course we teach a lot of theology here. We're a great text-based program, but because we're an Orthodox school, as far as I know, we're the only K through 12 and college that read a lot of Eastern fathers all the way
Okay.
through, and a lot of Syrian fathers actually inside of both programs, Lebanese writings, because of our roots, where we come from, but also because as Orthodox Christians, instead of reading about what the fathers said, we want children eventually to read the fathers themselves in
Wonderful.
translation, usually.
We'll
Uh,
discuss that later on.
yeah,
Wonderful. Yeah.
yeah.
Now, I would like that you describe for us your flexible schedule. Like I really have an innovative flexible schedule that I never saw in any other school.
Yeah, if you think about it, sometimes the way most people go to school, you would just get the class started or get people thinking about something and doing good work, and then the bell rings and you go on to the next thing. And then ultimately, when you get to a college level, classes are much longer. And so we're trying to prepare students, for the end goal, which is to get them ready for college and to be in college, not just at our place. Our students go many colleges and universities all over the world. But so we block the schedule to have long amounts of time, including some recess and playtime during the class itself. You might think of the traditional academic subjects as occurring on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And then the human subjects, think music and art and physical motor movements, things like that, as occurring on Tuesday and Thursday. And this allows us to give each of those subjects long periods of time. And for students, then we don't give homework to children, small children, because we don't think it's age appropriate. Homework starts slowly around sixth grade and then ramps up. And of course, college students are doing nothing but homework almost by the time
Yeah.
they're with us. So we ramp that up slowly, but surely. This block schedule allows parents, for example, who homeschool to come just on Tuesday and Thursday and utilize some of the fine arts programs that we do here, like choir. On the other hand, we have parents who Monday, Wednesday, and Friday bring their children here to experience some of the more science and math, for example, that maybe as parents, they don't feel that they can provide. Most of our students here are here, of course, all 5 days, Monday through Friday, but it breaks up the week, right? You're reading a
Yeah.
hard book, let's say a Dickens novel in ninth grade, and you talk about that and you read it, but you get a break from it, or you can keep reading it at home on Tuesday, where your other parts of your soul or your mind are being exercised on Tuesday and Thursday. And so this block schedule is much more like the college or university schedule that people will end up in. It's also more like the way humans behave. You don't, if you're working on something, you don't do it, in little chunks every day. You tend to go deep and then kind of take a break from it and move on to the next project. So hopefully it works for a lot of students. It's a good system, but you could call it a kind of university style scheduling.
Wonderful. Like it is important just to spread the idea, and maybe other schools can adopt that system. Like,
Yes, I hope so. God willing.
yeah, I like you have a slogan that it says wisdom, virtue, and joy. Could you like the choice of words are very interesting. Could you explain for us more what they mean?
Yeah, you always can tell a school by what it wants as its end goal. And I would like to say I was the first employee of the school and hired the key founding members. And one of the key founding members actually came to me. She's our current head of school, Kate Gilbert, and said, a lot of schools like we are pick goodness, truth, and beauty. And of course, traditionally, that's the end result of education. We want students who are good, who know the truth, and live beautiful lives. But she said, really, I have another way of looking at this. And we began to talk about it and think about it and find the mind of the church and look at the fathers. And we thought, what are we trying to produce? Souls fit for paradise, but also that serve the city. that serve, mankind, that are good citizens inside the city. And to do that, we want wise people. I don't know if you've noticed this, but sometimes the people with lots of knowledge are insufferable. They can't get along with anyone. They know a lot. They have lots of credentials, but they're not wise. On the
That
other
is
hand,
correct.
my Nana, I'm from West Virginia ultimately, only probably went to school 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, because that was all the school that was available. She was a very good student, but there was no more school, especially for women in West Virginia, girls. But she was the wisest person, one of the wisest people I've ever known. I would sit on the back porch with her, even after I was in grad school, earning a philosophy degree at a secular university with very fine scholars. I would get much wisdom from her, even though she didn't have much knowledge. So, could we be an educational program that brings together knowledge and wisdom and says, why not both? Why not do both? So, I love that. And we know that the fear of the Lord, this righteous reverential awe, knowing our place in the creation, is the beginning of that wisdom. And so that leads us to virtue. Excellence. I like the way the Greek, the New Testament, and even Homer thinks about virtue. It's an excellence. So, an mental excellence, a heart excellence, a physical excellence, a holistic personal excellence that also is a moral excellence, of course. And that's where Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. But we hope for virtue. We aspire to that kind of virtue. And then, to tell you the truth, we're not here to fast. We're about to enter, as we're recording this, the Lenten period. But notice inside of Christianity, we fast for the feast because we're headed to a great feast in the city of God. We are not headed towards eternal Lent. We're headed towards eternal Pascha. And so joy, this deep sense of fulfillment that you can even see in the martyrs, the kind of happiness, to use the, again, eudaimonia, a kind of deep happiness that's internal as opposed to external. I think the best English word for that right now is joy, joyfulness. I hope that if you ever visit the St. Constantine School or College, that you will see some joyfulness. Kids hanging out of trees and climbing and doing things. I mostly work with college students, given my training. But I hope you would see our college students, when it's not finals week, full of joy, full of the experience. So we have a lot of parties and gatherings. I just got done talking to someone. Our student life is very active. We have a lot of retreats, and we don't view that as separate from education. But after all, you as a doctor, or people who are medical doctors, don't want people to be in hospitals. We take people to hospitals so they can go out and live their joy-filled life. And in the same way, we teach them in schools, not so they can grind through to finals week and live in finals week, but so that they are better thinkers, better writers, better communicators, so they can have more fun. If you'll just let me be silly for a minute, we don't live for work. Our work should be joyful and not a grind. Now, we're in a broken world, so we get sick and we have to fast, and we do have to do our duty through the grind. It's not always, a thrill, and that's where virtue carries us forward. But after all, that's a broken moment. Again, we don't strive to go to the hospital. We strive to get out of the hospital.
Correct. Now, you describe your education as classical and Christian. Just tell us more about the components of your classical education and what is the philosophy of that. Although you talked about the philosophy before, but I would like to talk a little bit about it more.
So we created our curriculum with two things in mind, and this would be a little different wherever we were, wherever we were located. First of all, we're located in the United States, and most of our students are going to work and live inside the American Republic. So, and the primary language of power there is English. So we try to take a look at the roots of the English language, what books formed it, translations like the King James Bible or the Anglican Book of Common Prayer, or the writings of William Shakespeare. I mean, there are so many others, but you start to look at what curriculum would help a student be able to master and use American culture and the Republic as it is. So you're going to end up reading a lot of John Locke, one of the great thinkers that formed the mind of the American Revolution. This might be different in another country with another primary language. We're also Orthodox Christians, which is a more global thing than being an American. And so we look at the roots of the church. And I think, you know, we have a New Testament written in Greek. And so it's no shock that we would start with like Homer and move forward as we try to understand the formation of the Christian mind, even linguistically. And this is the classical roots of education. So the funny thing is, Christians have always been good at this. St. Basil, in talking to young men, and men were the ones who would head to secular education, commends Homer to them as a source of virtue. And so we really invented classical Christian education. It flourished in places like Constantinople or Antioch over hundreds of years. In Constantinople, with very few exceptions, there was no interruption in the study of Plato by secular, meaning Orthodox people who weren't priests, over centuries, over thousands of years. And then in some ways, the west of the world, through northern Italy in particular, where there were strong Byzantine or Eastern Roman influences, places like Florence or Ravenna, picked up on this, had the manuscripts, learned Greek, fused it with Latin. You get people like Dante, and this moved across Europe to places like where oxes used to ford streams, or there was a bridge over the River Cam, and they became Oxford and Cambridge inside the English language. But in many ways, Oxford and Cambridge should pay the Orthodox some kind of royalty fee or a methodological fee for borrowing classical Christian education from us. I kid a little bit, but it's very natural to do this kind of classical Christian education as an Orthodox school. I often get asked, about half our students or faculty, somewhere between 25% and half are Roman Catholic, because we're here serving all of Houston, and Houston is one of the largest Catholic cities in America, maybe in the world, very large archdiocese. And people often ask, isn't classical Christian education Catholic? Well, of course it is Catholic if you mean the universal church, but like Christianity itself, it was born in the East. So sometimes when people use the Bible, I also suggest that they thank us for it and send us a royalty check. But my Protestant friends have yet to take me up on that. So,
by the way, the formal name of our church is the Catholic Orthodox Church.
That's exactly right. So I love it. Another model when we were starting really was, I was looking to the behavior of the Patriarch of Antioch in the formation of the Balamand University, because I think there is no more beautiful image of Orthodox views of education than when, at the height of a Lebanese civil war, the Patriarch of Antioch would take some of the most beautiful real estate in the world and create a secular but also Orthodox school, university, and theological center. And immediately there were even Islamic people teaching in the mathematics department, I'm told. And this is such a beautiful image of what we try to do here. We have people, in our case, we hire only from Christian backgrounds that can agree with the teachings and practice of the church, but we'll hire people from many different Christian backgrounds. They're not second-class citizens. And as far as students go, we have no test of faith. So we'll have parents who are atheists who send their kids to school, and we say, the kid will go to chapel every day, and we will teach from the Christian perspective on moral issues, and many times their children will become theists over time. We don't proselytize. That's not what the church does. And so this image of the Balamand in particular as a place formed out of what was the church's response to chaos and hate? Education. And the Patriarch of Blessed Memory. This is so beautiful to me that I can almost cry, like as I think about it, as a response. When education is the response to war and hate, I think we've really found one of the hearts of Orthodoxy.
That is correct. Also, when I looked at your website, there is something that attracted my attention is the four houses.
Yes, yes.
I would like you to talk about this.
Yeah, often people who are Americans think of this as like Hogwarts, the old the Harry Potter children's series, because that's the only time they've heard of house education. But of course, this is a very ancient custom to organize students inside of communities where they can learn and grow together that span ages. So grades are one thing. Think about, if you're in the fifth grade, you mostly are hanging out with fifth grade age people and your teachers. I hang out with college students, adults, and they are together. But that's not the way the church works, and it's not the way a home works. A home has a mother and a father and may have adult children, and at the same time, my colleague next door, Annie Hickman, has children in our college, and he has children in our nursery. They span many ages. That's more like a family or a home. And so it's an ancient custom to organize schools, not just by grade level, like freshmen or sophomores, but to organize them by houses so that older students can mentor the younger students. And so in the house system, the four great houses of St. Constantine, Helen, Elizabeth, Anne, and Lucy, the students span the nursery all the way up to college students. And it's a beautiful sight to see a high school student going over and becoming a reading buddy with a fifth grader. Because they'll get house points, and they participate in winning the house shield at the end of the year. If you ever come to our commencement exercises, you will see students of all ages becoming very exciting, because no one knows who wins until I announce it at the very end of the year. And it's a very exciting moment. A little silly, a lot of competitions, sports competitions, and things like that, but also acts of service. The House of St. Lucy might reach out and do acts of service or charitable service, collect money over Lent. We've had a horrible earthquake in Syria and Turkey, and you can be sure that some of our houses will organize some charitable giving and some charitable acts related to that. But think of the house system as something that breaks down the age segregation and creates a beautiful, more like a home, of many different ages working together.
Wonderful. That is wonderful idea. But also, I was like the names also attracted my attention.
Yes. Now, this is what happens when I'm the first employee, because you create so many things, and so the houses, both the name St. Constantine itself, and then the names of the houses were saints that have had a profound influence on me. And in my development, I have to confess that the House of Saint Anne, my mother is named Anne, and Anne is her patron saint. Elizabeth, the New Martyr, is my wife, patron saint. So it's a little self-indulgent. But if you,
it's fine,
yeah, a little heritage. But if you look at it also, I tried to balance out four women who had a very different life. And a very different approach to faith. And, St. Helen was a very powerful power broker inside the empire as mother of the emperor, and was very active in creating and finding and building, but was nobody's idea of weak. Crossing good St. Helen was a dangerous thing to do. So a very powerful person, very involved in the society of her time, and, lived a long and natural life. And then you have St. Elizabeth, the New Martyr, in the more modern age, the 20th century, who was at the apex of political power, but then after a terrorist attack killed her husband, dedicated her life to service amongst the poor, and then, of course, was martyred by the horrific Bolshevik revolution that occurred. It's a different view of power and relationship to power. Saint Anne, of course, needs no introduction to anyone. There is a life of traditional, if you will, motherhood and giving. And if we as parents can produce a child like the Mother of God, we will have done very well. But someone who lived the life of what we might call a traditional wife and mother. which is another way that we can live as parents. If we don't succeed as parents, what have we done? Either as fathers or mothers. And then, of course, St. Lucy is an entirely different view. In one way, she accomplished nothing. She lived a very short length of time, probably an early teenager, and yet her faith was so great that she was martyred for the Holy Church and took what I call sometimes with our students the short way to God. Someone like Helen or Elizabeth, they live long lives, they make mistakes. Saints aren't perfect. We might not agree with all their choices, but then they also find ultimate fulfillment in the sanctity of holiness at the end of their life. For good St. Lucy, she lived a very short life. She did very few things, but she took the short pathway to God. They can kill us, but they cannot cause our defeat. So I came to see in these four saints, who are also from four very different periods. Anne, of course, predates in one way the formation of the church. The church has always been around, but very early. And then Lucy in the great period of Christian martyrs, Helen in the great age of empire, kicking it off, and of course Elizabeth in the 20th century during an age, let's face it, in the 1920s, a secular person would have bet that there would be no Orthodox in the world. Between the fall of the Ottoman Empire and the horrors that arose in that region of the world, the Bolshevik Revolution, the chaos in the Balkans, I think if you had been a wise person in that period, the Armenian genocides, you would have said that the Orthodox or somewhat Orthodox churches were going to be wiped out in the early 20th century. And yet here we are starting a school and college in the heart of Houston. God's church survives.
That is wonderful. Certainly you talked to us about how you deal with the kids, but I would like you to elaborate more about your philosophy that states let us let kids be kids. Sorry.
Yeah, so especially for young kids, I don't know how to say this differently than this, but some schools exist and their highest grade is fifth grade. And so sometimes they push kids really hard because they want their fifth graders to show what a good job they did when they go to another school in sixth grade. Because we have all the grades all the way through college, we're more interested in what's age appropriate, not pushing people past that. So there are two ways to go wrong with a school. Obviously, you could send your kid to a school, and we have these schools in Houston. It's very sad where they don't push kids enough, right? The kids are not doing age appropriate work. They're not learning to read well, write well, and think well. It's very sad. But notice the opposite error isn't any better. And that's where we burn kids out. My first job for most of my career, my job has been teaching gifted and talented college students. And one of the biggest problems I had, I'm talking about students that I would recruit, the average SAT was around 1,400, old style. And these are straight A students. And I didn't take half the students that applied in many years. And so when you face that kind of student, one of the biggest problems I had with 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, was they were burned out. They had been pushed so hard all the way through high school to get into a good college that they kind of took a vacation once they got there. Or they kept beating themselves over the head and working hard, but they were joyless. I don't know what it's like at the end of medical school, but nobody's happy at the end of medical or law school, I'm told. I know that by the time you're done doing a philosophy PhD, you kind of hate whatever you're reading. So there's a sense where you have to suck it up and do the work. Yeah. But with small children in particular, there's no research that shows that helps. In fact, lots of research that shows that burns the kid out and makes them less likely to like school and less likely to achieve. You can make a kid learn to read very, very early, kind of force them to do things they're not ready to do. But then the advantages that have been gained, they attrit out over time until about seventh grade, there's no advantage. So we try to do age appropriate things, which means, for example, I already said, no homework for small kids. We want kids to be able to go home and go to bed at 8 o'clock and get enough sleep and not be grinding through worksheets. And so in many ways, if you're at St. Constantine and you're only looking at standardized tests, our kids will be age appropriate and they'll be doing very well, but they're not juiced as far as if you had sent them to a school across the street. But you also see them wanting to go to school. I had a parent tell me 2 weeks ago that their kid lied about being sick because they didn't want to miss school. They wanted to go be in school. Well, by the time we get a kid to seventh grade, our seventh graders are reading in English Plato and thinking about Plato and beginning to, produce small essays about hard ideas. You want that kid fresh. But then
Yeah.
even seventh graders have long recess. So they're dealing with very hard things. Okay, by the time you get to ninth grade, they're still having recess as much as possible, but they're doing very difficult work. And when parents hear what senior thesis is for high school graduation, titles like Aristotle's view of something or other, they often gasp, I can't believe kids are doing this kind of work. Well, partly it's because when they were in fifth grade or fourth grade or third grade, they were out playing and playing creatively. The other thing that is done here is that we don't take every minute of a kid's time and program it. There was a time when free play and going out and having a good time was a natural part of living. My mom would say, go outside and don't come back until the street lights come on. And she didn't entertain me. I didn't have a phone that entertained me. I had to invent games. I actually wrote a novel based on some of the, stories that my brother and I would interact, battles that we would fight, imaginary characters we would interact with. That came as a natural part of childhood when I was a boy. But I'm 59, kids aren't that way anymore. Home is not that way anymore. And so we try to give kids unstructured playtime at a certain age where the teachers aren't telling them what games to play. This usually goes very well, but I can warn you that sometimes if kids have just been studying the French Revolution, we had a group of kids sending kids down the slide and pretending to guillotine them on the other end. This was free play that had to be brought to an end. The French Revolution game was not a great game, but
Yeah,
you know
yeah.
what kids will do.
Like this is how we were raised. We were raised on free playing, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And but
And
now, like
something
as I did with my daughter, everything is programmed.
Yeah. And so we can't pretend it isn't. The other thing that's true is there are actually some research, and you would know this better than I am, but we've seen it. Kids that come to us from other schools, they have no sense of balance. I mean, physical balance. They'll fall out of their seats. They're actually more fragile physically because they haven't fallen down a lot. And
Yeah,
so a lot of what we do is we have open-ended playground equipment. It's not really playground equipment. It's like a hill or a tree you can climb, or things that you can do in multiple ways, a sand pit that you can dig around in, of course, the animals that you can care for and play with. And what we find is that this physically actually helps children because you learn I can go this high in a tree before I'm afraid or before I take some risk. And
yeah,
actually, our insurance company, this is so true that our insurance company actually loves what we do because schools that have this kind of philosophy of playgrounds actually have fewer accidents than people who run around and try to make sure that
yeah,
nobody could get hurt. We once had a bishop visit, and two boys were wrestling. And I mean wrestling. They weren't fighting, they were wrestling. And a mom came up and said, oh, Your Grace, you should stop these boys. They're fighting. And he said, good, and walked away. And I thought, right, that's very natural. They're exercising, they're having a good time. Nobody is being bullied or something like that. And someone who learns, how do I handle my body? How far can I go? When do I feel safe? You don't want a kid finding out about risk and risk taking when they're learning to drive, because the mistakes that you make when you're learning to drive are a lot more costly than when you're trying to figure out whether you want to hang on the edge of the play fort or not.
that is correct. Now you have international trips. You do international trips for your students.
Yes.
Could you tell us about the goals of those trips and how do you choose your destinations?
Yeah, we're a global church. And so we want our students to have a global experience. And so over the course of my career, even before St. Constantine, this led me to go to Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia in a series of trips that I took with my students of that time, because we want them to experience the world as it is and be in service in the world as it is. With our current trips, we tried to take a piece of the curriculum, Megan Muller, who's vice president of strategic planning, and say, how can we experience this in a way that will drive home the lessons you've gotten from a book? But if you see Dante's Florence, and if you experience Italy, then a lot of the readings will come home to you. If you walk through Pompeii, there's no better lesson. You can look at that on a screen and it's kind of cool looking, but if you're walking down the streets of Pompeii, I don't have to tell you about the Roman Empire anymore. So Greece becomes very important to us as a trip. Italy becomes very important to us, and sometimes England will become very important to us in getting some roots. We would like to spend more time going over into the Mediterranean, but lately this has become difficult in terms of safety for students
Yeah.
to travel. So not yet, but someday.
Hopefully Lebanon, maybe Lebanon
Yeah,
more safe, certainly
yes,
more safe
that's
this year.
we would have been to Lebanon by now, to be
Yeah.
candid,
Yeah.
if that were possible.
Yeah.
We are working hard. For example, we would love to form an exchange program with the Balamand, and I'm
Yeah.
hoping in the next couple of years. I don't want to be presumptuous; that will be up to them, of course. But hopefully, even at the college level, we can exchange students, and people can experience the riches that are there and the depth of what is going on there.
Yeah, if you need help at that, we
Excellent. I'll
can
call on
also
you. Yeah.
contact people there.
Uh, Lebanon is so beautiful. I keep trying to get there, and the trip keeps getting canceled for
Yeah.
different reasons. But God willing, right? You
God
know.
willing, exactly. Now, if I say to you, I am a parent living in Houston,
Yes.
why I should put my kid in your school? What do you say?
Well, first of all, if you're a Christian or an Orthodox parent, we really increase the chance your kid will stay in church. So I would hope that an Orthodox parent would want their kid to grow up to be Orthodox. And I don't have to point out that education as we know it is becoming very hostile to the teachings of the church and to the church. And though there's no guarantee, no school, no, I mean, the number one thing you can do to do that is go to church with your kids, especially dads who go to church with their kids have kids that go to church. But education is a big part of that. So I would hope we could start with that. But secondarily, I hope we're a good education that's also safe. We don't shield kids from wrong ideas, but we introduce them in a way that has the parents back. When we look at forms of politics, forms of economics, forms of moral teachings, we have your back as a parent. Your kid will age appropriately be exposed to all the ideas that they'll eventually have to face in the world, even from their friends who don't go to the school or who do go to the school and have parents who aren't so great. But in a system where we support your values. And then third, I just think we're a good education. And you send your kid to school to get a good academic education. And I think through some of the things we've talked about, we have innovative and cutting edge ways of educating kids that produce better results than you would expect if the kid didn't go to our school.
Yeah. Now, I will go to my last question. Now,
Yes, please.
do you think our archdiocese, like you are expanding and this is good?
Yes.
And certainly, I believe the model of your education can be generalized. This is a very, very excellent model. By the way,
Yeah.
do you accept me as a student again?
Oh, me too. There are classes that are, in very low grades, and I think I should go take those. I don't know
Okay.
what's going on.
Yeah. Now, do you think our archdiocese can work to generalize this model of education?
I think it absolutely can. And I think there are two ways of doing it, and whether it's a St. Constantine school or not. The first thing we have to admit is most places aren't big enough and can't afford a St. Constantine school. I don't say that to boast about Houston or things like that, but education is very expensive. So unless you're in a state where parents are able to keep the money, their tax money, and give it to religious schools, an Orthodox education done correctly, where teachers are actually getting paid a living wage, it's not easy to do. So it has to be done carefully, and we can help work people through that process, but not every community will be able to do that. So I think there is an alternative, and we're working hard on providing what we kind of call school in a box. And this is amounts to a kind of super homeschool support group where nobody's particularly getting paid a living wage. You have lots of volunteers, there might be one or two employees, you're using church facilities, and the school might not go on forever. It might be, built to deal with that generation of kids, and generations pass and they come and go, but you're not putting hundreds of thousands of dollars of donor money into a school, or people aren't there, trying to buy a house and get a mortgage and make a career of working for this smaller, what you might call informal school, which may look a lot like a formal school, right? Have grades and this kind of super homeschool support group. I think that's how I educated my own kids. All the way K through 12, because I wasn't near an Orthodox school. I wasn't near a classical private school that I could afford. I'm a philosopher early in my career. Nobody gets rich being a philosopher, that's for sure. And so we use this kind of super homeschool support group and educational supplement. And this can also apply to kids who go to good public schools. We have some fine public schools in the United States that Orthodox families use. So could we have like day schools that provide supplemental education in this kind of, not a full-blown St. Constantine school, but for example, Arabic? We teach Arabic at St. Constantine. Could we offer it, in an academic program at our churches? Could we offer literature from an Orthodox perspective to Orthodox students? And they may go to public school. Can we do math supplement in areas where maybe the math and science programs in the public school aren't so great? In this way, we can serve all of God's children and not. The problem is sometimes we start schools, we don't count the cost, and we fall between those two models. We don't do a school that's excellent, that can survive in the future and pays its teachers well. And so we get frustrated and the school closes after 10, 15 years and everybody gets burned out. On the other hand, we think, oh, we can't do a St. Constantine school because I live in a small town in Pennsylvania. Is there nothing I can do? Well, no, there are lots of things you can do. Making use of the schools around you and supplementing or helping homeschoolers or doing things like that. So I think the problem is everybody would like to do the middle thing. They would like to do a St. Constantine school and not have a $10 million budget.
Yeah.
But it's like a hospital. We'd all like to open Orthodox hospitals, but a hospital is an expensive thing. Could we open an Orthodox hospital? We could, but it would cost billions of dollars to open a proper hospital. In the same way, schools aren't that expensive, but you're going to have an investment in the end of hundreds of thousands of dollars to open a school properly, or you should really be asking questions of the government schools nearby. I mean, they may not be spending all of your money efficiently, but it costs, $10,000 a student to educate a kid, and you can't get all of that back in tuition. So you have to count the cost to do it properly in the same way you would with a hospital. Then simultaneously, then if we don't live in an area with enough of the faithful to do a project like that, what can we do? And hopefully I've given you some ideas about that. The only thing I urge people not to do is to try to do something in the middle, to fall between the two stools.
Yeah, I understand that. That is great. Certainly, this is something to everybody to look at and to think about. I would like to thank you very much, John. Really, I enjoyed talking with you. Like, really, I felt I was talking with a philosopher,
There you go.
Which is very, very, very important, very interesting. And your perspectives are very wonderful for every parent, in fact.
I will have to tell my wife that you said talking to a philosopher is interesting, because she sometimes forgets this.
By the way, I originally I was very attracted by philosophy, and through philosophy, although I was born in an Orthodox church, an
Yeah.
Orthodox family, but I was not raised and like on real, I won't say religious education.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it is through philosophy that I went to Orthodox to rediscover Orthodox faith.
Right.
It
Yeah.
is
Sometimes
Beryadiev who attracted me to rediscover the Orthodox faith.
it's very exciting. Sometimes I think we take our Orthodox families and we catechize them better. I mean, we don't do catechism here, that's for the church, but sometimes they learn more about their faith through their students or church history than they may know. So when that happens, we're very glad.
Yeah. Thank you again, and I hope we can meet another time to talk about the college.
Well, thank you. We will do that. Anytime
Yeah.
you want to talk to me, I'm here to
Yeah.
talk.
Yeah, certainly. And we can talk about other things too in the future,
Yeah,
like
yeah, that's right.
because be about Christian education, about how to introduce Christian thoughts into kids, because this is, and you brought up Saint Basil a letter to young people about the Greek literature, which is
Great.
for me, this is the base on which I raised my daughter.
Oh, I totally agree with you. I cannot imagine that every Orthodox parent should not read and almost memorize that.
Yeah.
It's such a wellspring of truth.
That is correct. For this reason, I enjoyed really talking to you, and we will meet certainly in the near future to talk about the college and maybe later on also to talk about many aspects of Christian education, especially how to introduce Christian values to kids.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, and God bless you and your work.
Thanks very
Great.
much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.